Welcome, everybody. We're about to get started. We're just letting everybody in, but delighted to have everybody this summer afternoon. Well, I guess it may not be summer for everybody, given we have folks from everywhere. But for us in New York, sweltry summer afternoon.
99, I hear.
Yep, it's pretty bleak.
Yeah.
And I moved to South Florida because I was tired of winter. It's 86 here right now. I'm in South Florida.
That's an improvement over the 98 that I've got right here. So I don't know, someone decides to turn New York into like New Orleans or something. I don't know.
All the buildings, I know it's sweltering. I remember how hot it used to be when I lived there in the summer.
So while we're waiting, because people are trickling in, I wanted to, Mara, if you don't mind, I'm going to share what you and I were talking about while we were waiting in the waiting room. So I see Janet Hansen, the founder of Elevate, in the room as well. So Mara and I were talking about when she was at 85 Broads, the building at Goldman, and we overlapped for a bit, but you were part of the OG 85 Broads organization, Mara.
Yes. Yes. So all the way back in 2003, I think you guys were maybe 5 or so years in. But I was an analyst and would always volunteer to get involved because it gave me access to senior women and senior partners. And because there were so few of them, it was really honestly an honor to be able to find ways and have a platform to get that interaction. So we were talking about, back in the day it was very different. But it's very nice to be able to do a favor and see Elevate come as far as it has. It was, back in 85 Broad, very different times then. But the community is the same, obviously bigger and stronger, but still that same sense is around. So it's very nice to see.
Yeah, and that was just like one of those serendipitous coincidences. So for that's what we're meant to be about. The network that has purposeful serendipity. So okay, let's get started. So thanks everyone. Welcome, joining us. We're talking about how heat wave New York, but I'm joined with the founding team of SmartEsq, and I couldn't be more delighted to have these absolutely phenomenal women doing big things on this call today. So I want to introduce our team for today and our panelists. So we have Esther Chiang, who's the co-founder and CEO of SmartEsq. Thanks for waving, Esther. Esther, you've done quite a few different things. You started as an electrical engineer. Hopefully we'll cover that too. And then you spent 15 years as a private funds formation lawyer at Kirkland.
Yes.
So you've done a whole, arc from engineering to law firm to startup. And that we want to hear all about that journey. We're joined by Kristen Gandhi, who's also the co-founder and chief technology officer. And Kristen, we want to talk about AI, the world of development, the nitty-gritty of the ethics of it, the future of it, the privacy of it. So all of that we want to unpack today. Catherine Loenzon, who's the chief operations officer. And Catherine, you have a background as an attorney, but also legal recruiting, and you've advised startups. So we'll come at this from a different lens as well. And we have Mara Riley, who I briefly introduced, but Mara, you're the founding board member, you're principal at Apollo Global. So I think we'd love to hear from you kind of through the investing lens, your advisory role with SmartEsq, but also what you're seeing through the aperture of the world of AI businesses, where the opportunity is and where the gaps are.
Absolutely.
So welcome all of you to the stage. I couldn't be more delighted to have you here. To state the obvious, you're an all-woman powerhouse team. So Esther, I want to turn it to you before we kind of get into it, but tell us what brought all of you together. What were the professional ties? What were the friendships?
Yeah, sure. So This is a group of people. Some of you I actually met Kristen and Mara about 3 years ago at Chief, which, as you know, is another professional women's network. And so I would echo the sentiment that purposeful serendipity is very important. So before the end of last year, I was practicing as partner at a number of big law firms, and so my life have been very enclosed in terms of professional context, mainly with respect to I'm just in contact with a lot of other lawyers or people from the private equity industry because that's the industry I service. And I had this idea at that time on my own that I wanted to do legal AI tech company startup, but I didn't have a lot of resources to find the right people to do it. And luckily, I met Kristen and also Mara, who are similarly minded there. And Catherine and I actually met separately, actually around the same timeline, like 3 years or so ago. And as you might notice that we're both Asian women attorneys working in New York. So Catherine sits on the board of Asian American Bar Association of New York, and I met her through mutual friends there. So that's kind of how we came about. I would describe that we all had a friendship before we become a founding team together. So it's pretty cool.
I want to turn to you, Catherine, because each of you on this call have had these very, idiosyncratic career paths, some expected moves, some non-traditional moves. I'd love for each of you to share with, the folks that have convened today, what were your individual career arcs and how did it arrive at SmartEsq?
Well, my career path is unusual, and I think some of you may be able to relate. I graduated in 2005 with my law degree, went into private practice at a small firm as a litigator. Then in 2008, I got married, was pregnant with my first daughter. And back then, as many of you may remember, this was before FMLA was anything, was even required by law at smaller employers. So back then, even my law firm that I was practicing at, I was the first female attorney who became pregnant. So you can imagine how that story went. You know, it was a blessing in disguise because the firm not even acknowledging that I was pregnant, forced me to make that decision to leave the firm, and really think about what I wanted out of my career and my life. And at that point, I really didn't know what I wanted. I knew I wasn't happy, being a lawyer at this firm, at the same time entering motherhood. So I quit. And I ended up becoming a stay-at-home mom, and during the 7 years that I was a stay-at-home mother, I ended up having another daughter. So I have two daughters now who are teenagers. And during that time, I'm also someone who cannot sit still. That I learned, during this period of motherhood. I was like, okay, I need something to keep me busy other than, focusing on my children. I am too restless. So I hung a shingle and I remade myself, not as a litigator, because I cannot sit still writing briefs for 8 hours while taking care of two daughters. I became a business advisor and sold and marketed myself as someone who advised startups and restaurants in New York City area. And during that time period, I helped build a bakery in the West Village. From start to finish. I know a lot about restaurant wholesale, and I even ended up getting a license in food certification license, because you needed one if you're going to manage a food business in New York City. This was during the Bloomberg era, and through that, it was very tough trying to manage your own business and raising a family, and you realize that yes, I could get clients, and I did get clients, but it was a lot of work. It was a lot of last minute cancellations because you're all of a sudden your 2-year-old comes down with a fever, and you're on your way to a business meeting that that you're trying to get as a client, and then you have to cancel, and it was very hard. And then you end up becoming a bill collector because as a solo practitioner, a lot of potential clients saw someone that they could also take advantage of, right? They come to you for advice, and then they're like, when the bill becomes due, it's like, I don't know, do I really want to pay you now? Let's try to, how can we delay? And so I was like, this is exhausting. And I ended up meeting a friend, who was a legal recruiter. And he says, because at this point I was like, I feel like I need something more solid, right? In my life, something like a profession that was a little bit more solid, but also was able to use my skill set of networking. I knew that was a strength, as I found from building the solo practice, that my strength was in networking and connecting people and meeting people. And he said, you should try legal recruiting. And so I took a deep dive in that in 2016 and built a very wide network through that, because what I found my real strength is trying to be helpful. I think trying to be helpful to others. So whenever I met other attorneys, it was always from the lens of how can I help you? Either connect you with potential clients or, provide career guidance. And through all of that, I ended up joining the board of the Asian American Bar Association, where I felt I could really bring my whole self and my skills to helping the Asian American professionals, especially lawyers. And through all of that, I met Esther because through our network, they were like, oh, I have a friend, Esther, who's also really interested in building other women up, right? Trying to strengthen our professional network, and ended up starting SmartEsq with her. She's really great at, I think Esther's strength is seeing the strengths behind all of us and what we each can bring. And to get here, it's really about just always being open in meeting people and coming from the perspective of how can I be helpful? And here we are.
Yes, here we are. And at some point, I want to know the name of that bakery as well.
Oh, it closed down back in 2015. So unfortunately, we didn't last.
But I'm sure you have some amazing stories. Mara, I want to turn over to you. You're coming at SmartEsq as a board member. We have a lot of women in our community that, are kind of on boards, looking to get on boards. But I would love to kind of hear your journey of how you arrived at SmartEsq and your vantage point.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you heard a glimpse. I was at Goldman. So I spent 2.5 decades in global markets. So first Goldman, Deutsche, now Apollo, focused on structuring and risk governance. So a little bit different area than the lawyers on the line. But throughout that time, I've seen how workflows, specifically legal workflows, could lead to slowing down so many things, right? So my focus was specifically in my role on lagging capital deployment, especially in private markets. And so, Esther hinted at this, but I think SmartEsq was born out of that friction, out of, that kind of frustration. And I wanted to help build and strategize on a platform that wasn't just smart, but deeply embedded in how funds do things, because that was a world that I knew, how they run. And how I wanted to do things and how I run. So, you know, the punchline there is I think SmartEsq and the journey is personal for all of us. SmartEsq reflects kind of our collective frustration with inefficiencies and our belief more generally that the next generation of infrastructure should be AI native. And so going back to how I met Esther and kind of the center of all of this, I met Esther again, she mentioned, you know, through Chief, which was social setting, no formal boundaries, but we clicked. We clicked in our interest of a lot of things, but specifically in our industry. So private equity, different sides of the field, but all in private equity. And we were kicking ideas around. Again, it was social setting. So no like formal box or boundaries there. There's a lot of free thinking. And frankly, early on, I could tell Esther was brewing something pretty amazing. And it would come out in small glimpses. And then one day she laid out her vision. And frankly, I'll say I was in from the moment that she started talking about it. There was a lot of passion. There was a lot of, she was articulating a lot of what I felt in my own space. And so I don't know if you come across these times, but there's a person and an idea that you're into, and it clicks. And that for me doesn't happen often, but when it does, I tend to lean in, and I did lean in, and that's what brought me here today. It was Esther, the kind of shared vision of what SmartEsq can do, and the people. So meeting Kristen and Catherine and everyone else really kind of started to gel. So it was, you know, a chance meeting, but it was that shared interest and shared vision for the future.
There's clearly a theme here. It's about the power of women's networks. So we echo the sentiment. Kristen, you've spent 20 years in the engineering field. So we have the lawyers, we have the investors. Let's hear from the engineering side of the house.
Well, I mean, just like everybody else here, you know, had a totally different career, I guess, that had many fits and starts. And, you know, echoing a lot of what Catherine was saying about being a mom and being in the tech industry. I was in a company with over 4,000 people and was the only female that had anyone reporting to them, and was the first woman to get pregnant. And while the CEO looked at me and said, you know, and to his credit, by the way, I want to do the right thing. I don't know what that is. You're my leader. Tell me what we need to do. I also checked my email in the delivery room. So balance wasn't something that I was fantastic at. And I think it for a long time, I think it's taken a while to find that balance, to find that note. And, you know, to Mara's point, you know, Esther, I think, really has a talent. And she and I, just like Mara did, we just kind of clicked. And I think it's really exciting to be working with a group of women that are not only incredibly intelligent, but just, damn it, you're good people. And that just means so much, right? When you can wake up every morning, and if you're gonna go and work this hard, you might as well be doing it for a good reason and with a group of people that you know that you'd go to the end with. And so I'm really proud to be in that position.
I absolutely love that, because it's so true. I think that's what makes doing the hard stuff still worth it. It's the people you're in the trenches with. So I couldn't agree more with that sentiment. And Esther, I know I've known you the longest from the SmartEsq team, and so I know your background. But also, and I don't want to be bearing the lead. Tell us what SmartEsq has set out to do.
Sure. So I'm gonna dive into a little bit of my background. So I have the fortune to have two different careers. So I started out as an electrical engineer. I went to work for Qualcomm after I graduated from Stanford's electrical engineering graduate school in the Silicon Valley. And that's in the early aughts. And then I became a lawyer. So the way I think about it is always, so I think a lot of people with my background might start working in the IP or patent litigation field as a lawyer. And I did initially try that when I was in law school, but quickly realized that my strength and interest is really in designing complex systems and problem solving in that way. And so I got into a very specific corporate practice area, which is forming private funds, like private equity funds, private credit funds, private infrastructure funds, real estate funds, so on, because it happened to be a very intersectional practice that requires a lot of work. And what I mean by that is usually it's a multilateral negotiation that is, so usually it's like one GP with many LPs. And so it lends itself to the proliferation of a lot of complexities. And traditionally, how law firms had conquered that and helped their clients is by using a small army or large army of junior associates. And coming from my engineering background, initially, I think when I was very junior, I was incredulous about it. But then I gradually realized that law, and I really respect the tradition in law, is a little bit more apprenticeship. It's a craft, and people are learning the ins and outs and the experience. But after I became a partner almost 10 years ago, actually, I think more than 10 years ago, I had the honor of leading many very talented teams of closing funds and forming funds. I did think that, and I still think that there is room for introducing smarter ways of working on things. I had this idea since 2015, mainly because I see how not just time consuming for clients, but also a lot of the repetitive work causes junior lawyers to burn out. And so I wanted to find a better way that could suit with everybody, like producing high level work product while the people who work on them would still enjoy it and get the joy of why they went to law school. And so with that view, I had always tried to do something about it, even when I was a partner in law firms. I participated in many innovation projects, but 2015 was too early for Gen AI to bestow upon us like readily available access of artificial intelligence. So as of last year, though, I got a lot of sense that it was time to do it, and we finally have the resource to do it at a manageable level from a resource perspective and talent perspective. So long story short, I just ended up doing it, but I also had this thought that because it's a new market, it's a little bit like how internet had taken the world in the late 1990s, early 2000s, that it can help to create and elevate a lot of people. And I felt that to some degree, even though I didn't set out completely to form a female dominant company, but I thought that if we are going to elevate people, it might as well be women. And that was one thought. The other thought is, I don't have children, but among our team, core team, we have 6 daughters. So I also have 2 nieces. And so they're all like, I think they range from 6 to 16. Catherine, I think your daughter is 16, the older one. So we wanted to, similar to Kristen, I grew up in engineering school where I was always the 1% or like there are like only 10 women, there are only 5 women here. And
There
then,
was one
yeah.
one math major my year at Columbia University that was a woman, and that was
Yeah, and I was one of the 10 women out of the 200 who were my year at Stanford EE graduate school. And then I went to big law, even though we know that when we enter big law, it's mostly 50-50 women and men, but you can count how many women who rise to the top of big law. And so I think to some degree, very self-righteously, I feel that maybe it's time that we can do something for, if not anything, just to show our daughters, nieces, that we can also do something. And hopefully it's successful. And I don't know like whether it's making a statement, because I'm one of those people who always want to think that action speaks louder than words, but I guess this is our words of trying to achieve something. Yeah.
So let's get into that topic of women in AI. But there's another thread I want to pull into it, which was Catherine and Kristen's comments about, when they broke the news of their pregnancy. So I'm going to put two questions out, but I'm going to take it in turn and respond to both or either or. The first is, I saw the Thinking Machines news over the weekend, Mira Muradi's company raising $2 billion. That feels like a big moment, but then there's some other comps, and then it doesn't feel as a big moment. So I'd love to hear your commentary on women in AI. Are they raising dollars? Are there optimistic, positive signs you're seeing, or contrary? The other thing I want to put out there is responding to Catherine and Kristen's comment about their pregnancies. Post-COVID, we saw significant flexibility uptick. And I think this isn't limited to, startups or AI, but and I'm curious whether your career arcs would have been different if now flexibility is more on the table. And you could also give me the contrary that that's being rolled back, because we're seeing that as well. So I put both themes on the table under the women umbrella, but please feel free to react to either of those. But I did want to shed some spotlight on those comments. So Kristen, we're going to turn over to you first. Thinking machines or paternity, maternity leave? Your choice.
Well, I think maybe a little of all of it. I'll probably end with the latter and hand it over to Catherine. So, I mean, I think, the numbers speak for themselves. I don't have them off the top of my head in gory detail, but the percentage of venture capital that gets allocated to women is abysmal compared to the percentage of venture capital that gets allocated to men. But there is some really good things happening. So there's people like Dog Patch Labs over in Ireland. There's things like Array Ventures over in San Francisco. There's women that are realizing that on the venture side, that they should participate, rise up and stand up and support. So I've been really fortunate to meet several of those women that are starting some of those venture funds, and I'm really excited about what the future might look like. I think I find in my own experience in the tech industry is a lot of us women who are technical, we end up being the ones that somehow make things work. So when you look at Meryl's career as the CTO, she's the one under the hood actually making it all work. And you look at, my own career, I had titles like VP of implementations or chief product officer, all of these jobs that are technical, but under the hood, it's like, yeah, you're the one that just kind of make everything work. And I think that the numbers bear out that way too, is that female founded organizations tend to be more successful. Diverse boards and diverse C-suites tend to be far more successful. And I think that, I believe that will eventually catch up. But it's still very easy to look at a guy and say, he looks like something. I mean, I honestly read an opinion article just the other day about another legal tech startup, and they said the guy reminds me of Mark Zuckerberg, and that was their reason for throwing like tens of millions of dollars at this startup. So there's a long way to grow, but I do think we'll get there. As for, flexibility and stuff, I personally just built that. So I don't know that my life would be different. Because I'm a jerk and of a type A, and then I just walked up and I'm like, nope, that's not how this is going to work. And this is what I'm going to do instead. And, I just, I hopped around and found a way through. But I think that what people are realizing is that it's not maternity leave, it's families, and having room for love in your life that isn't your job. And people are starting to realize that when you make room for people to have families, and I don't mean children, I mean to have a life outside of work, and to be able to be there for the people in their lives that they love, to support their spouses, to support their elder parents, to really make a commitment to other people in their lives beyond themselves, that actually makes you better employees. It certainly helps us as a founding team to be supportive of the families and the love and the lives of the people that work with us. And I think that that's just going to proceed.
So I wanted to jump in for 2 seconds before Catherine. So I wanted to provide two anecdotes. So one is Kristen and I both had put in our own description. So Kristen's is a longtime engineer, prior CPO of a cybersecurity company. And me is a former electrical engineer and big law partner. And I think, I don't remember, it's ChatGPT, I think it, or Gemini, to draw a portrait of us. I think both came out as white guy, like
White guys with glasses.
yes, white guys with glasses, and that is just how the building bias is. And I think that those are anyway. So not to, but I do think that on the fundraising scene, they are the people who invest because they have money to throw around and they bet on things, right? And with or without firm thesis around it. And they are the people who do deep due diligence and research. And I think we have found that our team have met some success with people with deeper knowledge in legal tech. And so I'm very grateful for that. The other anecdote is that about creating flexibility with so many people who's on our team with family responsibilities, including Catherine, Kristen, but also we have an ally. Our chief legal officer, Paul, is a single dad. And so we actually all try to find time for each other. For instance, we are doing a client pitch preparation call today at 9 p.m. I mean, of course, something is going to give, but we try to work with each other so that we can attend bedtime and so on. But I think that is kind of one thing I would say is to break through the mold and think about what might work. That's our experience. Sorry, Catherine.
Oh, no, you said it very well, Esther. And part of me is, well, reason why we are part of SmartEsq and why I am part of SmartEsq, because as I tell all my friends, I get to build a company that I want to work at that did not exist before, or where I, wasn't even given an option. So to jump on, I'll handle the family leave or the flexibility in companies question first. There is improvement. I do see a rollback, but I don't think it's going to go back to 2008. I think, the younger generation especially know what they will and will not tolerate, and they are much more vocal. And I think as parents, we've been teaching our children to be vocal. I know my two daughters, who are 16 and 14, advocate for themselves in school, in their friendships. I didn't have the bravery to do when I was their age. I wasn't vocal. I didn't know how to advocate for myself. So I think the future is bright in that way. And I think there is it's incremental, it's not a major shift to everyone giving the same flexibility. Companies are rolling back, hybrid. They, especially at the law firm level, requiring at least 4 days a week now back in the office, some requiring 5. But they do see also the result of that is people are voting with their feet. They are leaving. They discovering that they have options, options that we may not have even thought of back in the day. They are starting their own companies or their own law firms. I think they're in a better position because of technology. And so that, I think we definitely see improvement. On the fundraising side, from my perspective, and I see this not only in fundraising, but professional women in general, trying to move up in their careers. There's a lot more expected of us to prove ourselves. So even while we're fundraising, compare us to maybe another startup where the founders look more like Mark Zuckerberg. I feel we are asked a lot more questions. And from the VC perspective, they're just doing due diligence, which is fine. But sometimes, I'm like, are we getting the same questions as every other founder who may not look like us, who may look more like Mark Zuckerberg? Are they getting the same type of questions where they're really digging into what we're building, right? Into the details, into the nitty-gritty. I don't know, right? But looking at the numbers of how many female founders are being, like Chris said, I don't know what the actual numbers are, but I have come across them in my LinkedIn feed all the time. And they're usually it's like 0.1% or something. It's something really ridiculous. And, I'm like, as just looking at our team and what we've been building, I mean, I would put our money behind us. It's like, we're the real deal. And that's exactly what I had told Esther when she showed me, a prototype of what SmartEsq was going to be. And I told Esther, because, I've worked with a lot of big law, and I've worked with a lot of big law partners who, came from all different types of backgrounds. So I had different perspective of how people were treated differently and sometimes unfairly. And some were given more credibility, even though they may not have the substance, right? And so when Esther showed me the prototype, I was blown away because, she built something, right? She built something that worked. And then you read story, and then I'm like, in the back of my head, I know people who just had an idea and they were able to sell it, right? But coming from where we are coming from as women, as minorities, we all know we have a lot more to prove. So we have to come with more substance. And that's for me, I'm like, okay, that's what we have to do.
On the back of what Catherine is saying, because I think it's very important. And we're talking a lot about, right, the biggest challenges and that women are underrepresented. And I could end there, but specifically underrepresented in AI and engineering and law. But I want to do a little bit of a call to action here, right, for an opportunity. Please. Because women are also very underrepresented in shaping use cases. So for anyone on the line who's like me, who's not the coder, right, who's going to build an AI machine here, what I want to mention is at SmartEsq, what I love is that all of us are coming from spaces, like so many women I know, that we're trying to transform, right? So we're always trying to make something the way that we want to work and where we want to work and what we want to do. And that perspective is very, very powerful. So at SmartEsq, we're building, AI that's not just novelty, right? But we're doing it for real world impact. And women bring a very unique systems thinking approach to that. And I think that's often overlooked. And so the opportunity for anyone who's not a coder, who's not a lawyer or engineer, is to make sure that women, are not just the users of AI, but the owners and designers and shapers of how it works and what it prioritizes. So if you have an opportunity in your role to raise a hand and be a beta tester, a pilot, and give some input, please do that, because I think the theme here is we're all doing something that, where we want to work, our product we want to use, and that comes from hearing more opinions from women. And so I echo everything else Kristen and Esther and Catherine said, but I also think there's an opportunity for people who feel like this might be a bit removed, like I did. Like, again, I'm not in there typing out Python or anything, but even just giving your opinion on a use case, that is a very powerful perspective when you're thinking about transformation and, bringing your own perspective.
Mara, I want to come back to you to talk about the next theme. What are you most excited about? Where do you identify white space? And it could be about AI specifically. It could be kind of women entrepreneurs, any of the above. What excites you through your vantage point sitting at Apollo?
A lot, actually. So I think, we talked a little bit about hybrid and COVID and what that did, and there are more senior women. And I think there was, there's an effort being made. And so at the company I'm at, and that's not every company, right? That's something I get really excited about, and hearing the opinions, because again, I think we bring a different, unique perspective. So the white space, there's so much, right? If I think about the progress and how fast AI has moved, it's really early on in solving for depth and trust and usability in high stakes settings. So for me, something that I think about is everyone's like, hey, I use ChatGPT to write an email. Okay, but like imagine a higher stake, part of your job using it to change your life, something that you depend on, not just like an inconsequential email that you're going to proofread anyway. So the white space that I see is for our kind of day-to-day to be transformed, to develop kind of depth and trust in the systems. Again, that comes from being a user, testing these and giving opinions and shaping what that is. So for me, as an investor, I don't think we're there yet with a lot of the tools, but we're getting there. If you're asking and prompting the right questions, you could actually use some of it today. Now, I think there's a long way to go, and that white space is quite grand. And if I look at where we were a year ago and where I think we're going to be in a year, it's not linear. We're making leaps and bounds in that space. And so I think the AI hype is real. I think there is a path to value that requires the right partners, building the right tools. And frankly, a lot of those people need to have what I'll call enterprise empathy. They have to understand where you're coming from, what you need to do to kind of change how you kind of behave. And they need to really grasp that to win the trust for people to use, not just dabble. And that's kind of the white space that I see. It might be more of an ethos than a very specific thing. But to me, that's what I'm kind of looking for, bigger picture.
So if I may chime in for 2 seconds, I wanted to echo Mara's call to, I guess, like action, because I'll give just very briefly 2 examples. One is I got very inspired by another chief member who started her own startup as well. She was a chief development officer for a nonprofit, so fundraising. So she got so good at her job that she felt that she had a methodology, and if she can do it methodologically, then she can code it. So she actually coded and made it into an AI product. So I believe that's one type of the use cases that people can think about. The other is that, so on the contrary of the use case, I think my colleagues here can attest to, I don't know how many legal AI startups are founded by technologists, most of the opposite gender, and their attitude is, no, I don't know what M&A is about, but it seems that there's a gigantic white space that I can found a tech company to take over. So I'm founding the company, but I'm not a lawyer. So can you just tell me what you do? So that's the opposite of, but they can still raise money.
Yeah.
So,
But I think
so
that is the white space, is to really listen to the end users, is that, Mara, your point, the use cases, right? It's really servicing the customer that you're designing a product for in a fundamentally different way than people have in the past. I think that's part of what makes us special. And I think that's part of what the future of AI really is going to need to be, is respecting the knowledge, whether that's knowledge that's used to train AI systems, or that's knowledge of the people that are using the systems. That respect, I think, is a big white space, and there's a lot of room for innovation there.
Yeah. Early on, there was this story kicking around about, hey, you could use AI to create some really cool artwork. And someone had this great comeback, like, I want AI to actually do the dishes so I have time to do the cool artwork. I don't want it to do the things that I want to do. I want it to do the things that aren't value add to me. And so that's where hearing the opinion of where, founders should be focusing their time to help support you, because eventually we're all the users. We're the ones, paying out of pocket and getting to kind of fall in love with these products. I think if people don't hear that, they're going to be creating really cool art. We're going to be stuck doing something we don't want unless we kind of flip that and let people know.
We're coming close to the hour, so I want to kind of circulate my dual final question for all of you. One, a cynical one, and one, an optimistic one. On the cynical, and you can answer that in any order you choose. On the cynical one, I want to talk about large language model development, where you see works like deep experts like Emily Bender talking about, if you don't have true representation in the way the model is built, it'll express the builder's bias. So I want to talk about whether you think that bias is a feature, not a bug, in the way LLMs are created. And then two, I want to talk about, building on what Mara talked about and Kristen talked about in terms of use cases, what's your favorite AI use case beyond SmartEsq as a hack that you want to share with our audience, that you think truly actually advances your interests, your joy? So I'll leave both questions on the table, and I'll kind of start with you, Mara, and then we'll take a turn as our final question, please.
So early in my career, I was told, if you're really angry, step away, write an email, step away, don't send it. That saved my career many, many times, by the way. I do that with AI now. So it's not like life-changing hack, but there are times when I start to write something that I know is not my best interest to hit send on. And sometimes I struggle on how to word something in an effective way. And so instead of taking a step back, I often will ask, one of the chat bots to reframe and reword. And that has actually resulted in constructive dialogue instead of where that could have taken me. So again, not like huge and life-changing, because there are a lot of really cool apps out there, by the way, and I encourage people to see what's out there, see what might interest you. But that's just something that I've benefited from a bit recently. It's been a busy summer, so that for me is something. Can you remind me the second part of the question?
The LLM, and in terms of like biases, because of it's so dependent on the data set being representative.
Yeah, feature versus, I go back and forth on that, right? Like, sometimes I want to take a page out of a middle-aged white guy's book and have this endless confidence, right? And so maybe it's not the worst thing to have a little bit of that. Now, that's probably not a very popular opinion, but I will say, I think that's where, again, getting our own voices out there is so important. I do think, for me, growing up in finance, being one of the only women in the room, I always had a different perspective. And so I do see that happening with AI. If you're going to have the same type of background, developing these products, you're going to have a lot of the same answers. So ultimately, while I like to say, maybe a little bit of that could benefit us, mostly I think it needs to be changed. We need to have the diversity in the inputs to have well-rounded different answers. Because if we're going to get the same answer we're going to get from going to one of our colleagues, that's not super helpful, right? So I think having that holistic view, and then we should have the opportunity and option to choose which one we like. But if we're only given one, and that's only from, you know, a very specific point of view, we're not going to progress in the way that we want to and transform in the way that we want to.
Thank you for that. So Kristen, I'll turn to you, and then Catherine, and then Esther, you'll get the final word.
I think it's a feature, because it means that you can create smaller models that reflect individuals and certain individuals' opinions and biases and have them work together. So it can be extremely dangerous, and it was pretty disheartening, or I don't know, scary early in my career back in like 2017 when we started training some of these models, 2016, 2017, to see there was like no regulation. You could just kind of, you were just kind of, I was lucky and happy to say that, you know, all of the companies that I worked with had really strong ethics around that and took it really seriously. And it can be really dangerous when you introduce biases and things like the hiring process, you know, like she doesn't look like what a salesperson would look like, right? So therefore she's not given her fair shake. But I think it can be a feature, and that we can get different models that have different personas that can work together and challenge each other, and create kind of like that next step and that next evolution in the way that things look. I have secret plans, whether Esther wants it or not, to have models trained on our advisors that have kind of their take a little bit more, but we'll see where that goes. And you know, as for my my hack for you is that very early on in my career, a mentor of mine, his name is Jonathan Crane. He's a really wonderful man. He pulled me aside one day and he said, "Kristen, you're really great, but you know what your problem is the tyranny of the urgent. So take 3 things every day, make a list of 3 things that you're going to do to move the needle forward so that you're not just stuck fighting fires, but you're really pushing on in your career." I took that on like no one's business, and I started doing it religiously, and I do it to this day. But now I get AI to analyze all of the tasks that I have going on and prioritize them and nag me to do the things and to do the most impactful thing. And it's actually really good at figuring stuff like that out. So you can just simply ask your favorite AI system to help you look at that. So that's my little hack.
I need to plagiarize that idea ASAP. So thank you. Catherine.
Yeah, so like Kristen, I think with the biases in the LLMs, I see it more as a feature that I don't want it to be a feature. I want more. I think we need more diverse voices building these models. And that's my hope for the future, so that we can fight the biases that are being implemented right now. I saw, as many of you know, if you don't, I'm extremely active on LinkedIn. So that's where I share a lot of my opinions, whether you want them or not. But I came across this thought posted by somebody else, and I can't remember it now, but it was something that I guess they were paraphrasing Elon Musk. Basically, who ends up building these models will be the owner of all human knowledge. And it was basically, the idea was, as these LLMs are being trained, and if they are trained with inherent biases, right, they're just going to end up feeding off of each other to the point where all of us will end up using these models. And what who will be the one to you know, tell the truth, be the truth teller? And how would you end up proving you're the truth teller if, you know, these LLMs are training off of each other and have these built-in biases? Like, who will be the one to provide the oversight if it's the same people providing oversight are the ones training, right? That really kind of freaked me out. I don't know what the, you know, when that will be or at what time period that will happen, but it, you know, seems a lot sooner than we all think. And I almost feel like part of us are also burying our heads in the sand, right? Because we don't want to face that type of reality. So on the so with the second question, I know that was kind of dark. With my second, I have Quillbot installed in my Gmail, and it has saved me many embarrassing emails. And along with Mara, in terms of like stepping away before you send an email, I actually have a 20-second delay on all my emails. So after I press send, there's a 20-second delay. And I can tell you how many times I have pressed unsend during the 20 seconds. So I am also a person, as Esther, Barra, and Kristen have realized, I am impatient, which has caused me problems because I react and I act. You need something done, I will get it. You know, I'm like, okay, but you know, sometimes I forget to, oh, I should probably stop and think a little bit. So that is something I've been practicing, is more patience. So that 20-second delay on my email is almost a lifesaver for me.
Thank you for that. So Esther, you get the final word.
Yeah, so very quickly, I think about the feature versus bug. I actually think that if it is not done well, it's a bug. So that's why we need agentic AI with good quality knowledge. To give a really super quick example, I would consider I'm like a junior legal expert because I'm the least experienced lawyer in my own company, SmartEsq. I only practiced for 15 years. Catherine has 20, Paul has 25. Our advisors each have 40, for instance. So I asked ChatGPT and Claude a question, which I know the answer, and I'm not gonna go into the details. It's wrong, but it's not wrong in a way that a normal person can detect. But it is absolutely question that what a legal client might ask their lawyer. And so I think, so I would consider the AI the biggest bullshitter in the world. That sounds right. And my concern is kind of raised to the bottom of the knowledge. So if we all believe in the bullshit, then the world becomes bullshit. So that is important to guard it. And so when people, including ourselves, use AI and thinking that, okay, I did also have a customer who uses ChatGPT to draft a legal memo. That also includes a not hard to detect error. And so I'm just saying that be careful, and that's why we're doing what we're doing is to inject expert knowledge into it. The other thing about what I usually do, I think it's very silly. I use ChatGPT to put my dog in synthetic pictures of different places in the world. Because I have a Chiweenie, and obviously I can't take him to travel to other places in the world. So he's been to Canada. That's pretty much it. So that's what I do, just to amuse myself. So
I love that.
Yeah.
But so that I'm glad we're taking it from the dark recesses of potential AI risk to levity. So that was the the right arc. We couldn't have been more honored to have the SmartEsq team join us. And thank you for our audience for making time during your summer Tuesday to join us. So this is recorded and we will be sharing it. So there will be the ability to watch this asynchronously as well. But Esther, Catherine, Kristen, Mara, I'm so grateful for your time and I have absolutely enjoyed this conversation with you. Thank you again and hope to speak soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.